Special welcome to Jackie, who's joining us for the first time. We recently met. Jackie's a librarian of special collection at the AJU in LA. We're studying today in the background of, again, perhaps the fighting resuming over this weekend in Israel and Gaza. The tragedy, the human tragedy, the destruction, the trauma on both sides. And we hope that our study is an example of how to think about human behavior in this world, how we might get better, aside from just wanting to be literate in biblical literature, also wanting it to somehow have an effect on us, which is what we usually do. We'll be taking a look today at chapter 10, just the first half of chapter 10. That should have been in the title. It's a lot of material. And I want to relate to some of the ways that these smaller units are broken down or can be characterized, say something about this next part of the book of Proverbs, and then to look at, as we usually do, some rabbinic literature, early and later rabbinic literature. One of these is going to take us very far off and bring us into the field, my beloved field of Judaica, which I don't know that much about, but love to study and discuss, something in particular from my friend William Gross's collection. And yeah, and we'll see if we get through it. The this part of Proverbs, up until now, we've been doing a collection of different lectures. They've been, even when we had to break it down, the you might characterize not necessarily every chapter, but there were a series of different lectures and lessons, if you will, on the topic of wisdom. Some of them thought to be relatively late from a historical point of view. We begin today the section which is again named Mishlei Shlomo, the Proverbs of Shlomo. That's just a title for what goes forward for the next 12 chapters or so. And the interesting thing here is that they seem to be just like one after the other, different quips, different kind of good eights, good advice pieces, and it's not always easy to see how they're connected one to another. There are those scholars who try to connect it no matter what, because they, in their ideology, it's to see those connections. And other scholars like Fox, who is my primary resource for the study of Proverbs now in this class, who says, sometimes there's going to be a connection and sometimes there won't. There could be small number of lines. Each of them are parallelisms of different types, but they're some sort of two-line parallelism. Each of these sometimes are connected to the one that come after, maybe three or four in a way. Maybe we'll see something like that. I have an idea about something now, but whatever I say, though, it doesn't apply to the entire book. Not like other texts that we've studied where it's easy to see why one section comes after another. We're always aware of the fact that they could have been modified later, at a later date after the original text came in. This is the same here in this text as every other biblical text. And there's an interesting idea, which Fox doesn't agree with, and I would agree with Fox on this, that I'll bring up a little bit later, having to do with God's name. Well, notice that God wasn't in the picture so much in the first 9 chapters. This was predominantly wisdom literature, which, although understood by the rabbis to be Torah, was really wisdom on its own, wisdom for its own sake. And I just put in the chat, if you don't have the text for today, it's at the link in the chat box. As you can say, I'm on my own today. Madalena, thank God, is on her way back with Gabrielle to Palm Springs. I think they're in the air right now, or they're just landing from Mexico City to Las Vegas, and they'll be driving. So we'll actually get to see Madalena very soon in person after over a half a year. Okay, so let's begin. 1 to 5. Richard, you want to start us off?
I have a bit of a cough today, so I would
Well,
keep
then
losing
feel
my
better.
voice. All right, thanks.
Okay, then. Harold?
Okay. The Proverbs of Solomon, A wise son brings joy to his father. A dull son is his mother's sorrow. Ill-gotten wealth is of no avail, but righteousness saves from death. The Lord will not let the righteous go hungry, but he denies the wicked what they crave. Negligent hands cause poverty, but diligent hands enrich. He who lays in stores during the summer is a capable son, but he who sleeps during the harvest is an incompetent son.
Hey, initial reactions, comments, questions. Rita Claire, you always have something to say when there's a familial situation.
Oh, goodness. I say that, goodness, there's a lot going on for the father to train his son and for the son to heed his father's counsel. And what I don't understand is that, unfortunately, there are righteous who do go hungry. And, those things happen.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're raising two items here. One about, and this is ongoing conversation we've had about how perhaps the Sitzim Leben, that is the setting in life when these things were written, was for parental guidance. By the way, while the emphasis is only on the son in this chapter, and we're repeating things that we've seen already, the mother does show up here, albeit she gets the negative thing, right? The wise son brings joy to his father. But the idiot son, by the way, in some translations, actually idiot son, not just somebody it's almost an intentional not wanting to learn. That's what some of the commentators say here. That is his mother's sorrow. So that, of course, is interesting. Why not reverse it? Let the mother have the positive thing, of course. That's our own modern way of seeing it.
To me, Rabbi, to me, it almost sounds like the writer is blaming the mother, though, for the dull son.
It has that tinge to it, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Which, of course, is what all of us who have children always did. I certainly did it all the time. When one of the girls did something wrong, I would say to Sasha, your daughter, right? Didn't we all do that, right?
I never did that.
No, you didn't. But okay. But then Rita Claire's bringing up a theological issue here. Just a moment, Jackie. A theological issue is that you get to the sign, Lo yar'iv Adonai nefesh tzaddik, the Lord will not let the righteous go hungry. Whoa, there's righteous people that are hungry all the time. And there's a line, a biblical verse that comes up at the end of the full version of the grace after the meals, Birkat HaMazon. Nar haiti gam zakanti v'lo haiti tzadik ne'ezav. I was young, I was old, and I never saw a righteous person who was forsaken or forsook. And
seed begging bread.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah, thanks for completing it there. And many of us don't say that line. I stopped saying that like in the 90s, maybe even the late 80s. Once I found out once I learned from an academic point of view that the prayer book kind of grew and got greater and greater, and pieces were added on by different customs, and other customs don't even have that verse, which is the case with Birkat HaMazon, the blessing after the meal. I just leave it out. But yeah, and by the way, there is a custom to say that quietly, because maybe somebody can hear you who does think of themselves as a tzaddik. But Jackie, I think you wanted to say something. I don't know if it was that. Just unmute, please.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that, looking at the last two lines, he who lays stores in the summer is a capable son. Why not a capable person? And the following line, why not a capable person?
Okay.
And I'm not saying it because a son connotates male, and maybe, we wanted to say child. It's the reflection on the parent. Are they guilting us? You don't want to embarrass your parents, so you better be a capable child.
Yeah, so that's actually a very good question, and not with the I'm glad you mentioned that it's not just because our modern understand or our contemporary understandings of gender. It's interesting that the second where it says and the one who sleeps during the harvest is an incompetent, in the Jewish Publication Society it says an incompetent person. I switched it back to son because the two lines there have the word in Hebrew ben, and so do
Mhm.
the two lines at the beginning of this poem, this unit,
Mhm.
ben uven. So to my mind, that's an intentional way of saying this is a literary unit. Now,
Right.
because the answer, I think my answer to your question, your comment would be, Jackie, that this particular tidbit of wisdom is directed towards parents. It's in the context of parents. It's not one of these klal kind of things, one of these general statements. That's what it seems to me here to be, and therefore, yeah, that's why I isolated or delineated this particular unit from 1 to 5. And the Proverbs of Solomon, by the way, I could have put it above the box, right? It's really not part of it. Rabbi Malka.
I was wanted to comment on the part that negligent hands cause poverty. It seems that you hear that well, if you're poor or if you're impoverished, it's because it's your own fault.
Right.
And I
Right.
guess I take just like I take about the righteous forsaken, I differ with that.
Mm. You differ, but do you take it? Do you delete it?
I
Um,
differ.
You
I don't
differ.
really. I
Yeah, you're
really
more.
delete anything. I try to reinterpret it like I'm the righteous forsaken.
Yeah.
I take it the righteous forsaken, not in terms of food or God's presence, but the righteous forsaken in terms of learning and being able to experience the Shekinah. That's the way I just reinterpret things.
Yeah. And Jackie makes a good way of understanding it as well, Offer says it's not the poor person's negligence, it's those who see the poverty and don't help who are negligent. Society,
That's
government,
true.
yeah.
That's like
Beautiful.
Leviticus says that if we see someone in need, we're obligated to help.
Right. A lot of these things that are bringing up are in the context of these last 2 weeks of news, of course, right? What is going to happen with social services and the tension between social services at the local or semi-local level right now, for instance, in the Riverside County, that's the county that we live in, and and the national government, the federal policies, and then again that where the countersecting what's the word, the intersection, I'm using a little bit different, the intersection of how that connects with other parts of the government's agenda, like raids and people not getting their social services because they're afraid of getting arrested, etc. Yeah, these are great things. The one of the I forgot to mention in the title, I made a note here. The No, now I don't remember. It's the title Mishlei Shlomo is not in the Septuagint, but I forgot what that it's missing in the Septuagint. Oh, I think it's missing in the Septuagint in the Greek translation. And Fox's assumption is or yeah, Fox's idea understanding that is to say that you don't want to say that only these are Solomon's parables. The whole book is Solomon's parables. All right, that's really not connected. Let's take a look at that one line that I underlooked, that one line that I underlined in the Hebrew, tzedakah, tatzil mimavet. And then
Mhm.
I lean back here. Yeah, let's look at a little bit of, well, yeah, we go kind of down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I like to do that from time to time so that we can learn about other types of literature, other literary sources in our tradition. More often than not, it'll be from the Babylonian Talmud, as you know, but in this case, we're jumping to the 13th century to an interesting, very strange book, and then how that leads us to um, an old puzzle that's been solved long ago, but when you first see it in Judaica art, then it's a little bizarre. So let's see. Jackie, you up for reading? Would you like to read from the Talmud?
Baba Batra 10a.
Yeah.
It is taught, Rabbi Yudah says, greatest charity in that it advances the redemption, as it is stated. So said the Lord, uphold justice and do charity. For my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness is to be revealed.
Okay. Before we go on, just an issue of translation here. unlike the Jewish Publication Society translation above, which translates the word tzedakah to righteousness, the translation here is something that we're more familiar with. Tzedakah as translated by charity. Now, there's an issue with that as well. Charity has to do with something from the heart. That's more of a Christian way. About giving tzedakah has to do with justice. When we give money, it does have to do with bringing about righteousness and equality in the world. But that's just the way that he plays it out. And it's giving this idea of charity / justice, tzedakah, we'll just use the Hebrew word, a life unto its own. It's almost personifying it, as we've seen this in rabbinic literature for other things as well. I see that Eileen's having some trouble.
It'll be okay. I'm figuring it out.
Oh, okay, all right. So go ahead, Jackie. We're the second paragraph in the Babylonian Talmud.
He would say, 10 strong entities were created in the world. A mountain is strong, but iron, which is stronger, cleaves it. Iron is strong, but fire melts it. Fire is strong, but water extinguishes it. Water is strong, but clouds bear it. Clouds are strong, but wind disperses them. Wind is strong, but the human body withstands it. The human body is strong, but fear breaks it. Fear is strong, but wine dispels it. Wine is strong, but sleep drives it off. And death is stronger than them all. But charity saves a person from death, as it is written. Any charity delivers from death. And it's
Okay.
Proverbs 10:2, 11:4.
Right,
Yeah.
which is the from the section we just read.
Right.
Does this kind of, just as the character of this piece here, is it reminiscent in form to anybody? Anybody? I see you dancing around with your head. Which
Had God, yeah. I mean,
right. Remember Chad Gadya at the end of the Seder for folks that didn't that get that far without falling asleep or being distracted by the grandchildren, whatever it is. Chad Gadya is one of those kinds. There must be a name for it in literature, for the kind of poem, song, idea, which, with that, and it's almost circular, of course. In Chad Gadya, who gets the last word?
Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the penultimate is the angel of death.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably put there because of the connection with the Makat Bechorot. Chad Gadya wasn't necessarily, was not at all a song that was designed for the Seder. It was adopted into the Seder later on, as my teacher and friend, Professor Avigdor Shenan, has taught us about a lot of those songs. They were, in some cases, they were, I don't remember this one, if it was a wedding song, could have been a drinking song. I don't know. Does anybody have any examples of this from Western or English language culture?
Isn't it the house that Jack built?
So, or yeah,
There's a
yeah,
hole in the bucket, dear Henry, dear Henry. Again, you need this to need that, to need that. They're all circular.
yeah. All a great way to keep the children busy when you're driving, taking a long drive through the United States, right?
Yes.
That's after you've done the license plate game and before you've stopped for the bathroom. Okay.
Counting cows.
Yes.
And this because I read this over when I first received it, and I'm looking at and tzedakah keeps you from death. Well, walk around any major Jewish institution and look at all the names on the walls of people who have physically passed, but their tzedakah lives on in supporting that institution.
I love that. I had not thought of it in that way at all. I'll share with you in a second how I had thought of it. Yes, yeah, tzedakah, indeed. That's so sad. I can't believe well, first of all, because I've never been in an institution that has a building. Like I've always been a building. And even when we did, even with that small amount of time I was at Temple Isaiah or at the Stockholm Great Synagogue, it's too full. You can't get away. There's no more naming opportunities. But for
and I've been in the development VP, which is all about naming. So
there you go. Well, great. And now you have if you want to have the longer version of it, or after a few drinks with your donor, you can do this one. You can say.
But you wouldn't know, perhaps each of those persons, their life was extended. Had they not done the tzedakah, they would have had a shorter life.
All right. So you're going back, Richard, to the traditional understanding.
Mhm.
Traditional understanding of this is that it, there are things you can do. You can buy time.
Mhm.
What is that called in the church?
Oh, when they used to sell, oh yeah, in the Middle Ages, they
Indulgences.
Indulgences. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So indulgences are the same. It's the same
Mhm.
idea. Or Tony Soprano paying for a new roof of the church in Newark or wherever he was in Caldwell, New Jersey. For those that are just joining us, I have recently rewatched The Sopranos from the beginning to the end. So it's very much part of my Torah in the same way the Game of Thrones used to be in those days, or Star Trek before that. So yeah, so this is the traditional idea, Richard. Traditional ideas. So much so. Um, No, yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. The first thing that I say when I'm reading through the Hebrew of each one, and for those that are relatively new with us, I've never taught Proverbs before. I've never read through the entire book of Proverbs. I've read through many times the narrative prose, different prophets, but Psalms. I probably read through Psalms at one time or another, each of them to teach, but I've never read through Proverbs. So when I see a phrase, especially that's well known in modern Hebrew, in Israeli culture, we usually talk about. I very often that those are the phrases I underline or I bold. Um, and stakat tatzil mimavit, for those that I
Mhm.
don't see it here, but in Israel, almost every. What do you see, Sasha? At every, are you with?
Yeah.
Where do you see stakat tatzil mimavit?
Stickers in cars, on buses.
So Sasha says it's on stickers and cars and buses, but before there were bumper stickers, there were pushkas, stucco boxes in cemeteries. And almost every cemetery in Israel has a section. Usually it's around where the hand washing is on your way out. And there's a box that's, a charity box that's in, it's stuck in the thing. You can't just think that says staka tatsumi mavet. If you're scared because you've just been to the cemetery, we have a way to help you. If and that's part of the money that supports the cemetery. I hope, I suppose, I don't know. Yeah, so that's very much in the background. But I when I went to look for different other sources, I thought I would find something more about that. Came across this section in Sefer Hasidim. Sefer Hasidim is a really interesting book, 13th century, from a group that we refer to as Hasidei Ashkenaz. These are not the Hasidim as the the Lubavitchers and the Vizhnitzer and Satmar Hasidim. The 13th century Hasidim were Hasidic movement was in Germany, in Ashkenaz, and it was rather ascetic. A lot of fasting, cold rinsing and dunking in cold water, things like that, and a lot of really interesting customs. I'm not well versed in it. There's entire books that have been written about it. I haven't gone through it from the beginning to the end, but I do have a copy, and I often look up something because I just find it so fascinating. And here he goes off. We don't know. Some people attributed this to Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, but I don't think that that's accepted in the academic world. But let's take a look at this Malka. If you're willing to plow through this, I don't know if this is a text you've ever seen before, Sefer Hasidim.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so
Okay.
here's your first visit, and I'm not sure you'll be back, but go ahead.
Sefer Hasidim. There are nights when the souls come out of their graves, like on the eve of Hoshana Rabbah, when they come out and pray. And so it once happened that two people went and hid themselves in the graveyard and heard that one was calling to her friend, "Let us go and pray together." All of the souls came out and prayed and asked for mercy so that death would not be decreed upon the living, and those who will die, that they return from their evil ways, and that they die through minor illness, and about every matter of the living and the dead, and about themselves, to quickly remove judgment from upon them and from upon others.
Okay, so let's take a break for a second.
Oh.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you have now a window into what happens in I assume, Jewish cemetery, but in a cemetery after the lights go out, right? There's a whole thing going on there, right? They're having they're going there praying for each other. But here's the problem. There were witnesses, there were human living witnesses. Go ahead.
And so they told their congregation, The next year, on the eve of Hoshana Rabbah, two others went, and only one virgin didn't come out of the grave who had died the week before. They said, "Come out." She said, "I cannot, because my father was rich and lost his possessions and buried me without clothing." And they heard that some of the souls said, "We will not gather together because two have already revealed us to many. Rather, each one of us will pray in the grave so that the living will not hear and tell everyone about it." And they became angry at the father and took clothing and clothed the virgin. And when a shroud decays, it does not hold back the soul, for behold, despite the body's decay, the soul rests in the bones, although it departs from the dead body, as it is known that sorcerers who raise a spirit bring it by means of dust that's absorbed from the dead.
Yes, folks, this
That
is
absorbed from the
rabbinic
dead.
literature. This is medieval rabbinic literature. Is it mainstream? No. Is it I would imagine influenced by Kabbalah. Against I haven't really studied the scholarship on this, but and what is clear here, it's not well edited there, or it's stream of consciousness reading. It's kind of going from one, and by the way, in the soul and the woman, and she's buried and being buried without clothes, and like what's going on in this man's mind, right? That he's writing this stuff. But the interesting thing for me here is this idea of the activity of the souls, which is very well documented, written about in medieval Jewish literature. Those of us that grew up in the liberal, progressive Jewish world, conservative movement, reform, whatever, or even modern Orthodox, are not necessarily exposed to this kind of literature and these kinds of ideas. Those that grew up with or have a lot of learning in Chabad, they are very much, or other, or the Kabbalah Center, places like that. A lot of this kind of stuff gets involved. This is not the Zohar per se, but a lot of this stuff is there, and it permeates all sorts of explanations. So when people say, "Oh, but Rabbi, that doesn't sound Jewish to me," no, it's very Jewish. It's just not the Jewish that many of us grew up with, or the Jewish kind of literature that we use in a practical way, I would say. Maybe some of us do here, I don't know, but so Annie, before we look at that final line in a second, which will bring us
Why is
into,
it that the souls come out on Hoshana Rabbah? How is that? I don't understand why they're related. It's repeated twice here.
yeah, because that's the tradition, that is his tradition. Now, is this the first time? I don't know, but that Hoshana Rabbah has special meaning. Is that part of your practice, Mark?
Yes. Yes. Hoshana
And
Rabbah. Yes.
the beating of the
Right.
boat, right? So there are a lot of customs that we don't do in Or Hamidbar, and if you didn't grow up in a traditional home, you're not exposed to it. But a lot of these things on Hoshana Rabbah, it's almost as if Hoshana Rabbah is the day before the last day of Sukkot in biblical
Right.
terms. Before,
Shemini Atzeret.
I'm sorry,
Before Shemini Atzeret.
yeah, before yeah, yes. Well, no, before the seventh day. Seventh day is yeah, before Shmini Atzeret. Yes, yes. And in the diaspora, the day before Shmini, yeah, still Shmini Atzeret, and then Simchat Torah. But it's the last day. It's the last day of Sukkot. It's the last day that you. Yes, Yizkor is said the next day, so that could be some connection. But it's kind of like last chance. It collected a lot of customs and Torah around it, that it's your last chance of the high holidays. And we all thought that the last chance is Ne'ilah, when the doors are closed, right? That's the way that was meant to be. That's your last. You can't keep telling people last chance, last. Of course, advertisers do it all the time. The clearance sale last night, but in the logic of let's call it normative or mainline Jewish tradition, Yom Kippur was the end. And then you take a break for a few days, you build your sukkah, and you have a samachta b'chagecha. You have joy on that one particular holiday of Sukkot. You pray for rain, especially on Shmini Atzeret. Then with time in Babylonia, they had these 2 days, didn't know what to do with it. They already had instituted reading the Torah on an annual cycle as opposed to a triennial cycle, which was the custom in the land of Israel. And so they decided that became the day of saying we start and end the Torah. We end the Torah reading and start again on Simchat Torah. And Shmini Atzeret got relegated, most of the things having to do with praying for rain. Then when Jews moved back to Israel in the 19th century, or masses of Jews, then suddenly there was once again only one day. So that one day got both praying for rain and Simchat Torah. But somehow at some point, people, I guess they had guilt. They couldn't get past their guilt, whatever it was. They kept pushing things off, and Hoshana Rabbah became a day of almost like a mini Yom Kippur kind of a day. That's your last chance to get rid of your sins. So that's why it's connected. And sins have to do with graveyards and feeling guilty, and the fear of death. Um, but I guess to really answer the question, Rabbi Malko, we'd have to look at Hoshana Rabbah, what's happened, what are the other issues in the liturgy, for instance, what exactly, Hoshana Rabbah has been. I've never been a fan of Hoshana Rabbah because in my mind, even when I was in yeshiva, I said, Daima, speak, enough. We did Yom Kippur. Let's move on. And me seeing people that are not able to move on, they're the ones who promoted Hoshana Rabbah. Anyway, that's my tirade against Hoshana Rabbah. But now we get to a really interesting, fascinating aspect, and that's on the last lines of this section of this paragraph from Sefer Hasidim, which are on the top of the second page. Go ahead, Malka.
It happened that one man didn't see his head shadow on Hoshana Rabbah night, so he and his loving ones fasted numerous fasts and gave a lot of tzedakah and lived many years after that. As it is said, tzedakah saves from death.
Now, the picture below is from one of many. This is a picture, it's not in all of them, but a picture that appears in different versions of something called Sefer HaMinhagim, Minhagim Buch. I'm sure, Jackie, you've seen them over the years. They're very plentiful. They were kind of a very popular book that was published in Central Europe and different places. Germany, there's a lot of them. A lot of the woodcuts, illustrations became like postcards and posters and stuff over the years. In the last few decades of the 20th century, people kind of discovered them. And if I'll point them out next time we see them. I use them from time to time in our Madalena and I. We use them in our Oramid Bar advertising because I have access and I have permission to use anything from Bill's collection. But I remember seeing this for the first time. Again, I don't have an art history background. I didn't study that at Hebrew University. I once did some work on illuminated manuscripts of Josephus because I'd heard a lecture and I just felt, and so I started to read this one. I forgot she's from Rehovot. Do you remember her name? I can't remember her name. Lovely, lovely scholar. But that was all I did. And then when I started to work with Bill Gross in Tel Aviv, when he was the president of the shul that I was the rabbi in 2000, 2001, we started to do a lot of teaching in the collection together. And I remember seeing this in a number of the Minhag Buchen. They're little books. They're kind of like, it would be like buying like a paperback today or a small book, which would be usually in Yiddish. There are others in other languages, but in Yiddish that will tells you what are the different customs for each of the holidays. So it's written for not for the scholar. It's not scholarly literature. It's popular. And so, like other popular works like Tzena Orena, which we've spoken about before, which is the rewriting of the Torah which became very much a woman's book, even though it wasn't necessarily meant for that, not by the author. And let's see, another book called Yosifun, which you find in libraries. A lot of these have the editions, they have these kinds of illustrations. And I remember seeing this and saying, Bill, what is this about? And he says, well, hey, maybe mum something. And then I probably went to the sources then, but I got to the Sefer Hasidim source this week because it quotes our verse. That's how I got to it, through Sefaria, which I encourage all of you to use. That's how I got to it. And then when I saw it, I said, oh, now we have to show the picture. So this is a different way. Instead of me seeing the picture first and then saying, let's explain and figure out what it's about, which I usually do. This was seeing the text first, and now I can go back to the picture. Has anybody ever seen this picture? Jackie, I'm sure you've never seen this?
Actually, I haven't. I mean, I have a Sefer Minhagim that I got when I started JTS, but it's not illustrated. It's just
right. So you probably have Sefer Minhagim, which is Sefer Tamei Minhagim, which is Schilling.
Yeah.
It's late 19th century work. It's great. It's one of the first Sifrei Kodesh that I bought. Eshkol put it out. He's getting, it was also for many years a bar mitzvah gift for people. I didn't get it for my bar mitzvah, and I loved it. Really interesting. That was, and since then I've bought over the years, I have maybe 15 or 20 different books from a span of 600 years or so that, or 500 years, I should say. Yeah, maybe 600 years that are explanations of customs. Many of them are very local. Still, most of that material that I have that I've taught over the years is in Hebrew. From time to time, I'll translate it and we'll get back to it. But this is a really bizarre one. So if you look at the picture, let's start at the top as we often do. What do you see at the top?
Sun and the moon. I mean, we're harking very
Stars.
sheet there.
So I think in this case, it's the moon with rays.
Mm.
I would say although no, I know it's the sun because it has to do with the shadow, but you see a man with in his hands either the Aravot or Arbat Aminim, a lulav and etrog could also be. You don't see the etrog, but most probably the Aravot because the text on the side talks about that particular custom. But I just have a picture of I just have an image of the picture online of my collection of digital. So if I don't have the text itself, also my Yiddish, it takes me a long time to decipher a Yiddish text like this. But
what does
nonetheless,
that thing ahead have to do with Hoshana Rabbah? I'm
well,
still,
you
you didn't see his head shadow.
right. So we don't have that explanation, but
Oh,
it's mentioned in Sefer Hasidim. That now, I guess the fact that perhaps the person's not, he hasn't been atoned for yet. He hasn't atoned. He hasn't given enough tzedakah. That's now,
are you supposed to see your head shadow?
I think you're supposed to see your whole body shadow.
Right, that's why I was wondering.
Right.
So
I mean,
he saw the rest of his body, but just not his head?
But Malka, once this storm you guys are having passes, go out in the sunlight and check yourselves, check and see.
I have to give more tzedakah.
You may have to if you don't have to. I mean, you're okay. So, yeah, there's got to be a fundraising gimmick in this as well, right, Jack?
Yeah, that might be happening.
You go with donors into the garden. You say, okay, so, and so the interesting thing here would be, and I cannot believe that people have to have written about this. It's just so bizarre that this is some sort of a element from folklore from other cultures.
The headless horseman.
Yeah.
Ichabod Crane.
Yeah.
But I can remember seeing this the first time. I said, like, Bill, what is that about? What's going on here?
Oh, he has great stuff.
And I think what Bill said to me at the time was something like, "Oh yeah, well that's in a lot of them." Well, that's not an explanation. Is that just means that it's not as rare. So that's one kind of a dovetailing. Do these sources make us better people? I don't know. I'm not sure. Although it does give us some sort of an insight into people and what's on their mind about death, the fear of death, looking for omens, for signs. Superstition, people have different levels of different types of superstition. And this whole thing of beating the willows, you take 5 branches, put them together, not the one you have in your 4 species, right? In your lulav and etrog. You take 4, and when you go to an Orthodox synagogue in some Masorti, you pay a few bucks or whatever, a few shkalim for your little thing. You wait to that time of Hoshana and you beat it. Like, what is that about? That's from the world of magic. That's from the world of not exactly. Besides the mess that it makes in the synagogue, you got to clean up all those leaves afterwards. Okay, but I looked through the few tzedakah boxes that Bill has. I just don't think he has a lot of them. There's a family. I'm guessing I know one of them. Do you know Jackie Peachy and they're benefactors of HUC and I think of the museum of
The Magnus Museum has a collection of JNF boxes.
yeah. So this family had a collection of stucco boxes. I was at their home once and it was stupendous, right? They're good friends of Bill's. But so this is not just JNF boxes, right? The stucco boxes is an old custom. I don't know how many, right? And Bill only has 3 or 4 in that didn't that there. I didn't see this inscription, but you do. I have seen over the years a stucco box like this one, which is contemporary on the right hand side. That says zakat tatzil mimavet. Charity will save you from
Mhm.
death. And this is, I mean, this is contemporary. It's nothing but I don't find it terribly aesthetic. Um, but uh, um, but yeah, but you do see it. I looked through the internet. I was trying to find a picture from a cemetery, and I didn't do that. I didn't spend hours on this. I spent a few minutes, right? But that would have been my main point here.
Next time I go to my in-laws' graves, I'll try to take a picture.
Yeah, like Hulon, Bat Yam, everywhere.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly. And it's very common. I don't know if it's more common amongst Mizrahim and Sfardim in Israel as opposed to Ashkenazim. I don't know the answer to that. Now, many of you know also, perhaps you know if you've been to a daily minyan, that not on Shabbat, at least in Orthodox conservative synagogues, there's no dealing with money and charity on Shabbat. In some Reform synagogues, there is that possibility, which is why, by the way, the upcoming in all the WZO international Jewish elections, which we'll talk about at some point, not today, but that's why the Reform movement has always gotten so many more votes, not just because they're more members of the synagogue, but because they do it on Shabbat when everybody comes to shul on Shabbat. And conservative Orthodox shuls don't do that kind of thing. And of course different from the church world where that's central to fundraising is the collection. But what was I saying? I was saying that
just this past year I went to all the cemeteries in New York that for my parents, grandparents, and I don't recall seeing any tzedakah boxes. The hand washing, but no. I mean,
yeah, I agree with the one that I met all the time is Mount Sinai in LA because my father, blessed memory, is there, and I've done a lot of funerals there over the years. Yeah, I don't remember seeing it there either. It's more of an Orthodox thing. Maybe it's more of an Eretz Yisrael. Maybe it's more of an Israeli thing. Yeah, Sasha, can you remember that from Holland? A tzedakah box?
Tzedakah boxes,
No, from the cemetery. I can't remember it there. And that's a really old Jewish cemetery.
Yeah,
Ashkenazi. Anyway,
one of the cemeteries in New York I went to is a really old cemetery for New York.
Yeah.
And my grandfather's buried, and I mean, and I don't. It might have been.
Yeah. And it could have been something that wasn't the aesthetic of the United States. I don't, or maybe it's a new custom in the last 70, 80 years. I don't know. I don't know, but anyway, that's the idea. And of course, all this is ironic if you understand the word tzedakah not as charity, giving coins, but as justice, doing justice. What I was about to say that in an Orthodox minyan, there's somebody will walk around. I think it's usually during the repetition of the Shmoneh Esrei, or maybe it's after the Torah, maybe it's during Ashrei. I don't know. At some point, somebody walks around shaking the box to every individual. And there's a lot of like peer pressure to put something in. And you see people, I mean, I haven't been to Orthodox synagogues in recent years, really, but over the years, you see, somebody putting in a nickel or a quarter. Of course, if they put in a penny, now we know that a penny is worth far more than a penny. So
No more pennies, yeah.
yeah. And we know that nickels are worth far more than dimes now, all the literature, all the education we've received in the last few days. Okay.
But some of the minyanim in Israel now have electronic tzedakah boxes. You just tap your card.
Yeah, and I saw that for the first time in Sweden in a church. In the entrance, the back of the church, there was a card reader. This is in 2010. I said, "Whoa, that's easy." Yeah, yeah. Or what do you call those QR codes now you see in churches a lot? But still, a lot of people in churches, many people still prefer to put an envelope with a check or cash. I notice that in the churches here. There's something very Richard, what word am I looking for? Very cathartic, maybe, in being able to put the cash, doing it. Yeah. Okay. So let's, Megan, you want to see us through 6 to 14 as we finish up this first half of this chapter?
Blessings light upon the head of the righteous, but lawlessness covers the mouth of the wicked. The name of the righteous is invoked in blessing, but the fame of the wicked rots. He whose heart is wise accepts commands, but he whose speech is foolish comes to grief. He who lives blamelessly lives safely, but he who walks a crooked path will be found out. He who winks his eye causes sorrow. He whose speech is foolish comes to grief. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but lawlessness covers the mouth of the wicked. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers up all faults. Wisdom is to be found on the lips of the intelligent, but a rod is ready for the back of the senseless. The wise store up knowledge. The mouth of the fool is an imminent ruin.
For those that see the Hebrew, that can read the Hebrew, you've
Mm.
seen that I put in bold a number of words, and I always intend to go back and do it in English afterwards. I, of course, didn't get to that or forgot to do it here. But the words that are in bold in the Hebrew here are, I'm just going to go down. You can follow in the English. The first line is head, second line is mouth, fifth line is heart, next line is lips, few lines afterwards is eye, lips, mouth, lips, heart, mouth. Get the picture? So, to my mind, this was a, let's go back to what I began to say about these are individual parallelisms of, one day we'll talk more about the different types of parallelism. It's not just that you say it one way in the first line and the same thing in different words in the second line. More often than not, it adds something in the second line. Sometimes you say the opposite, but there is a binding idea to these one-liners that have to do with body parts. A lot about the lips and the eyes more than the others, and that kind of ties it together, even though the actual content of each one, the message, the direction it's going, are various directions of good and bad, and success and failure, life and death, those kinds of things. The so, but I should have asked for comments first. Sorry. Comments or reactions to this paragraph?
Think that's just opposite lines. The name of the righteous is invoked in blessing, but the fame of the wicked rots. That's opposite to what Shakespeare says.
Which
He
is?
says that the wickedness that men do lives on forever, but their good deeds are interred with their bones.
So for all the thoughts that for all those that think that Shakespeare was Jewish, no, forget it. There's your proof right there. Or he wasn't learned. Yeah.
He wouldn't have Shylock if he was Jewish.
Or he could be like Woody Allen, self-hating Jew, as people call it. Not I'm saying that, others. Harold.
What's involved in, or what's bad about winking one's eye? What's meant there?
I think it's how do you pronounce the word lascivious?
Oh, lasciviousness?
Lasciviousness. I think that's what it would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in a leering, ogling kind of way,
Yeah.
rather than just because you can wink at somebody in a way that the two of you are sharing a joke or something like that.
Well, I don't, first of all, it's not halacha, right? So it's not as if this is but the interesting question is intentional winking of an eye. Is it always connected with deceit of some sort of dishonesty? Even when we wink with a joke, it's saying, well, don't take that too seriously, right? Or is it flirting? Or that's an interesting question for social anthropology. Is eye winking, where does that sit in different cultures? I have no idea, but
Could be different kinds of eye winking.
yeah, there could be, or it could always be deceitful, I think. But I think that would be the answer here.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like if somebody says something to somebody else and they sound serious and it makes them sound serious, and then they turn around to somebody familiar with them and then they wink at them like, hey, I've just told him, I've just pulled the wool over his eyes.
No, I understood, but that's deceitful.
Right.
Because when I first said it, I wasn't really serious. I didn't mean it, right? Yeah. Okay. So the words that are underlined in Hebrew, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and interesting, the the name of the righteous is invoked in blessing is is kind of almost a tortured way of saying what I would translate, and I think many would translate here is may the memory of a righteous person be a blessing. And so many of us know I think people are familiar with what we say in English, may this person's memory be a blessing, right? We're constantly saying that. I know some people say, may this person's memory be for a blessing. I think that's needless. I don't think it's really English. In any case, that's a translation of Zichrono livracha, Zichra livracha. May that person's memory, the memory of that person, be a blessing. And it's different than a lot of the many of the Ashkenazim, at least my parents, didn't know that term, Zichrono livracha. They would say Alav Shalom or Aleha Shalom, Olav Shalom, right? You may have said that, but Olav Shalom is Alav HaShalom, may peace be upon that person, or Aleha HaShalom, upon her. And you change it when it's somebody who is a righteous person. Very often in the Orthodox world, it's a rabbi, a great rabbi. People won't say the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zal. They'll say the Lubavitcher Rebbe Zatzal or Zatzuka. There's all different kinds. You can add more and more words onto it. And again, this is when I'm reading this, and if a term comes out, more often than not in Proverbs, it's because it's in usual practice. It's in day-to-day practice in modern Hebrew. And that's my only comment here. As was staka tetzil mimavit, most Israelis will know that, and I think will come, oh yeah, that's what's at the cemetery in the staka box. In this case, when people say zecher tzadik lavracha, they say, oh, that's what some people say when the person who died was on an elevated status of a holy person. Okay. Parting comments or questions? Yes, Rita Claire.
I think there's one sentence that kind of stands out for me, but the love covers up all faults. So I'm going to take that away with me today.
Okay, well, that's a great way for us to end, isn't it? The power of love and our weekly reminder that our purpose here on earth is to spread compassion and love as opposed to assert our power and deal with our fears by oppressing others. Thanks for being here. I'll see some of you tomorrow at the gospel study with John, and we're changing up. Just for the record, hopefully we'll put out a correction today. The next in-person Shabbat morning is not going to be this week, as we wrote yesterday. It's going to be next Shabbat, the 22nd, as was originally put in. That was the original date, and we went back because the 3rd is this week. Doesn't matter. But it is going to be the 22nd at our house. And Anne and Larry will be here. Anne will be called up for an aliyah as her first time ever, because she just became Jewish officially. And also Debbie and our grandchildren will be here as well. So I can't guarantee they'll stick around for that, because it might be easier for her to take the kids out then, but we'll see.
If I bring the dog, will the kids stay?
Yes. The kids will love to see your dog. Absolutely. Yes. Bring the dog. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, good. I think he'll be here that day. So yeah, I'll bring the dog.
Maybe we can get Rabbi Debbie to read from the Torah or something. Okay. All right, everybody. See you. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.